How are you, Prof?
Àlàáfíà fún yín o.
Ẹ ṣeun ọjọ́ o.
Ọlọ́run ló ṣeun o. Ẹ kú múra.
Ẹ ṣé pọ̀ sà.
We thank God.
Thank you so much.
Ọlọ́run.
I visited an office here in UI.
Okay.
And the person was actually making a presentation, and I saw your presentation on the screen. So I don't know. I think some people recorded how they got this, and I wouldn't know. Ọ̀gá Moberio, Prof, sir.
Báwo ni o?
Kẹ́mi Ọláògùn, sir, thank you so much for honoring us, sir.
Abba.
We honor you too.
Ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́.
Ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́ sà, ṣé gbogbo nǹkan lọ sà?
A dúpẹ́ o.
Ẹ káàárọ̀.
Ẹ káàárọ̀. Wọ́n lórí ìdọ̀bálẹ̀ mọ́.
Ẹ káàárọ̀.
Ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́ mà.
Professor Soyinka.
How are you, ma?
Àlàáfíà ni a dúpẹ́.
Ẹ káàárọ̀ ládùúgbò yín.
Ẹ mà káàárọ̀ o.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma.
Ẹ kú ijọ́ mẹ́ta.
Yọ́ kan pẹ̀lú.
Ta ló ń kà ó? Prof. Hello, sir. Ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́ sà, sálàáfíà lẹ́wà sà. We thank God o. We salute your leadership once again o. We are enjoying ourselves. Àwọn sójà lẹ́yìn bá ṣiṣẹ́.
Àwọn sójà indeed.
Good evening, sir.
How are you, ma?
I'm fine, thank you.
Ẹ ṣé pa ma. Thank you so much, ma.
Good
No
evening.
problem, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, 12 people today, so that's good. Oh, they did it 13 by. Hold on. She was.
Operations going just to one side.
Professor Sogolo, ẹ pẹ̀lẹ́ o. Are you there?
How are you?
Professor Sogolo, sir, how are you, sir?
We are fine, Prof. Hey, all the
salute, sir. Our commander-in-chief. I said you are our commander-in-chief.
Thank you very much.
Well done, sir.
We are moving ahead.
We are moving. Under your leadership, we are very lucky to have all of you leading us.
Yes, we thank God.
Some of our people are not this lucky.
That's it too. It's God's making.
We thank God, sir.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this energy to the seminars.
The series, yes.
We need to thank you.
The way we have started, we will go very well.
Yes, and
yes,
it's growing. It's growing.
It's growing.
Because those that participated in the last one, the lecture given by Professor Gunyemi, in fact, many of them
yes,
will be here today.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yes, we They tasted it, and they said the thing is sweet.
Yes, Professor Tuba just said you invited him. I hope you sent the link to
Yes,
him.
I sent. Yes, I
Okay.
contacted him. I contacted him.
I hope he
Many
can
of
make it.
many of them will be here. In fact, from NIA, many people will be here.
I discussed.
Mm.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Before we have.
Professor Adebayo,
Yes, sir.
I thought you were in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm in Atlanta.
But what I saw, maybe I don't know the geographical, what I saw in your address stated, is it the same Atlanta?
I don't know what you saw, but I'm in Atlanta. Oh, you mean Kennesaw, Ackworth?
Yes.
I mean, we are just a suburb of Atlanta.
Okay.
It's like saying Lagos, but you are in Ikeja.
Oh, okay. You know, I'm not very familiar with the American. It's UK. That's where all of us.
Well, you are a citizen of UK, so
We are. America scares us.
well, we manage.
Yes. That's wonderful.
Professor Odejidema, mo wà lórí ìdọ̀bálẹ̀ mọ́ o.
Prof.
Yes, sir. Prof.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Okay. So àdúgbò wa lẹ wà àbẹ́ wà nílé?
Àdúgbò yìí ni mo wà.
Okay o. Ẹ kú àsìkò yìí o.
Professor Dejide.
Àdúgbò yìí gan ni ilé báyìí.
Professor Dejide, I want to thank you for helping our committee.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. We have submitted our report.
You have? Okay.
Yes.
So when is it going to be taken?
I don't know. Well, it depends on the president and the executive. But we have submitted. We have finished our own part.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Professor Sogolo, you have your hands raised.
Oh, it's a mistake.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
How did I do that? I don't even know where I pressed now to.
Maybe
I'm not very familiar with this your modern system. You know, in our time, we never had anything like this.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
We had no idea of computer.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good evening, President.
From whichever part of the world you have joined us.
Are you speaking onshore or offshore?
Which shore?
Sure. Well, let me welcome us to today's session of the NAL Dialogue Series to be presented by the chairman of the planning committee.
Let me tell that he should come out.
Without wasting our time, let me hand over to the chair of the session, Professor Adebayo, who is offshore and is chairing a seminar onshore. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome everybody, Professor Sogolo, Professor Dejide. Of course, Professor Adebayo was one of the first to join, and quite a number of our other eminent members. GRA, I didn't hear you, so don't worry. Let me appreciate everybody, but let me hand over to Professor Folabo. Thank you so much. I saw you. Let me hand over to Professor Adebayo to please coordinate this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me welcome everybody, but let me also try to set the protocol by I I didn't see the list of those who are already online, but the FP and the IPP and all the PPs. So I want to thank them for their commitment to this series. And I want to thank everybody for your early attendance. People have been here since 45 minutes before the hour, so that's wonderful.
Yes, that.
Now, if you are not speaking, I would encourage you to please put yourself on mute, especially when the speaker begins to speak. All right, eventually we'll get it right. Historiography has been defined as the study of how history is written. In other words, historiography is how historians have interpreted the past. Memory is our human ability to recall information and events, whether sweet or unpleasant, from the past. How much of the past is stored in our memory? How much is forgotten? How much is retained for later use? The decay theory proposes that memory fades due to the mere passage of time. Whether we like it or not, we will forget some things and we will remember some. Hermann Ebbinghaus, the German psychologist, pioneered the study of memory, discovered that forgetting occurs at a very rapid rate. That forgetting occurs at a very rapid rate in the very first few days, and then forgetting continues, whether you like it or not, to the point when you can no longer remember that event or information. How much of this lecture will be remembered tomorrow, the day after that, or the day after that? What if a person or a group of people or a nation loses its memory? What or where is the national memory in a country that stops teaching history in schools? What does memory have to do with strategic historiography? These are among the questions today that our lecturer seeks to answer. I will now turn my attention to introduce the lecturer briefly. His bio is long. Isaac Olawale Albert is Professor of African History and Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Ibadan, where he is also the pioneer dean of the Faculty of Multidisciplinary Studies. He specializes in conflict analysis and peace process planning, implementation, and evaluation. He had his PhD in African history at the University of Ibadan in 1994. In 1999, he was invited by the United Nations. He was invited by the United Nations International Leadership Academy for a certificate course in peacekeeping and conflict resolution. The rest, as we say, is history. Subsequently, he trained in peace processes in various countries, including the UK, the USA, South Africa, and many other countries too numerous to list. Professor Albert served at various times as a consultant to the United Nations, the World Bank, and the USAID. He's a full member of the Chatham House. Within West Africa, Professor Albert is a consultant to the Command and Staff College, JAGI, the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Abuja, and the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Accra. He is also a member of the Executive Committee of Codestria in Dakar. Finally, within Nigeria, especially in its academic circles, Professor Albert is a member of the National Standing Committee of Nigeria's Tertiary Education Fund, TET Fund, and was a federal delegate to the 2014 Nigeria's National Conference in Abuja. Professor Albert is a fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Letters, fellow 1950, and governing council, member of the Nigerian Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators, and fellow and board member of the Society for Peace Studies and Practice. Professor Albert is editor-in-chief of the African Union's African Journal on Terrorism. His latest book with Professor Badijo and Yahya is titled Mediating for Peace in Africa, a first script in honor of General Abdusalami A. Abubakar. Professor Albert will be speaking on the topic Remembering, Forgetting, and Denying in Strategic Historiography. Please join me in welcoming Professor Albert to the digital podium.
Thank you so much, sir, Professor Adebayo, for agreeing to chair this. I count your presence in this exercise as a moral booster. You have announced the topic of my presentation, but let me repeat it. The title of the presentation is Remembering, Forgetting, and Denying in Strategic Historiography. So the presentation is on strategic history, strategic historiography. But I'll try as much as possible to simplify the presentation in a way that will enable all of us from our different disciplinary contexts to have a sound understanding of what I'm trying to say, and probably for all of us to start to work on the issue of strategy. Strategic history is known in diplomatic studies as history in the service of strategy. So history, strategy. But I will give a very simple example to illustrate the point that I'm trying to make. In the past, before you give your daughter out in marriage to anybody, there is usually a person, quote and unquote, that could be called strategic historian. The strategic historian is asked to go out to find out who is this person that is seeking the hand of my daughter in marriage, do they have any record of insanity? Are they very good people? What is their religion? And how faithful are they to public good? And it is only when that strategic historian comes back with a verdict or a position that we begin to say, okay, we want to give this girl out in marriage. So in other words, the role of a strategic historian is to go out to collect information having to do with the past of the situations that we want to deal with. And it is, our decisions are based on the kind of history that is returned to us. Now, I'm scaling it up now to the level of international diplomacy, to the level of warfare, to the level of governance. And the tradition in many parts of the world is for political leaders or leaders of business organizations to commission strategic historians to provide information that will inform decision making. So in other words, you don't start a business without actually engaging strategic historians to do what one would call visibility studies. This business that we are trying to go, that we're going into, how many people tried to be in that type of business in the past? Were they successful? Did they fail? If they were successful, what factors actually made them to be successful in the business? If they failed, what were the problems? Now, the role of strategic historian in that context is to do what is called context analysis and to do what is also called SWOT analysis. SWOT has to do with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And the decision maker now will sit down and look at the records and say, okay, we are basing our decision, on the facts that have been placed before us by a trained person. Strategic history is not for everybody. It's for those who have been properly trained. Now, what we are trying to do in this presentation is to take a critical look at 3 problems in Africa and ask ourselves, to what extent can we actually apply strategic history? Or to what extent is strategic history applied to the 3 contexts? The first one is what in humility I will call military decolonization. I don't want to say the expulsion of France from the Sahel, but I decided in this presentation to refer to what is happening in the Sahel as military decolonization. The second one is to take a critical look at Tinubu's recent romance with France. And then the third one is to ask questions around President Trump's America First. And the question we are trying to ask ourselves is, all these decision makers, did they actually consult strategic historians? If they consulted strategic historians, what kind of submissions were given to them? So this presentation will demonstrate how the undercurrents of selective remembering, and selective remembering has to do with remembering what you think is good for you to remember. Several of us don't want to remember certain things. And yet, we want to take the past as a useful tool for shaping the present and the future. So we're looking at selective remembering, deliberate forgetting, and instrumental denial of facts of history. You know, how all these will have significant consequences on strategic decision making. Now, I talk to students of history, and I realized that the nationalist historiography that I was introduced to in the 1980s is still the same historiography that is still being taught. And if you ask yourself, what is a nation? What is nationalism? Can anybody actually claim to be a nationalist in Nigeria today? So if our ideas of nationalism in the 1980s is still what we are packaging and feeding into the brain of students, one is to say that probably we are misleading these students. Now, even if we are teaching nationalist historiography as it should be taught now, we are saying that the world has moved beyond just nationalism. Political leaders think strategically now. Countries think strategically. It's no longer a question of nationalism. If you go to America, it's difficult for you to say you are defining nationalism, not to talk of Nigeria that is even not a nation. So what I want to do at the end of this presentation is probably to challenge history we write, how we teach history, how we collect our data, and therefore the extent to which decision makers can truly rely on what we write. Now, I want to provide the background to this presentation. The first thing that led me to this topic is the assignment I had in the year 2008. It was an international assignment, and that project was labeled Historicizing Migration Project. So some scholars, students were brought together from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, and they were placed under me for 3 weeks. And my assignment was to teach them how to historicize some of the things they were studying. And this is because the global community realized that when you study any problem too synchronically, if you do not bring in the diachronic analysis into what you are doing, you might end up actually basing your decisions on not solid ground. But if you look at a problem historically, you are better informed about what it is, because what it is alone is not just enough. There is always a history behind history. So this project was the first that forced me to start thinking of strategic history. The second one is when we transited to civil rule in 1999, the global community tried to bring us into what is globally referred to as revisiting the past projects. And Nigeria was advised to have an Oputa panel. And Oputa panel was woven around the question of the role of history in constructing the future of a country. So people were asked to come and testify about the problems they faced from the 60s to the end of the military regime in 1999. Of course, that project failed. The report was not even released, so it was difficult for Nigeria to use the product of Oputa panel to shape the future of Nigeria. In 2005, there was the Obasanjo conference. It failed. And then the 2014 conference, which I participated in, that one also failed. And the reason is that Nigeria has always been too reluctant to correct past problems. And yet, we are looking forward to a glorious future. It is not possible for you to have a glorious future when you deny the facts of your history. The third reason why I decided to write this paper is an encounter I had in Abuja, where some state officials whimsically dismiss everything about humanities. You know, there is a policy now that all universities must be development relevant, and that those that are not development relevant, they will teach them new things. So I was forced to challenge one of the people driving that project in Abuja. I said, what disciplines are you referring to? And he referred to history. He said historians were not trained for anything. And I said, okay, now, what are you planning to train them to be? He said, of course, they can learn soap making, candle making, and this humiliating dismissal of the field of history or dismissal of everything about humanities, to me, is a product of ignorance. And when I looked at that, the aspect of history, I said, well, it is either that we historians have not been able to tell this country what we can contribute to development, or Nigerian state officials are continuously denying the relevance of history. But I said to them, you can deny everything, but you cannot deny the role of strategic history. Nigeria is failing because we are not actually deploying the expertise of strategic historians. People talk about ship coming to drop goods in Lagos and going back empty. You know, how many have we ever talked to our professor in Unilag, who is a specialist on maritime history? If we have problems with our international diplomacy, how many Professor Kenyades have we talked to? So the problem is that the country is not using us, and I'm asking myself continuously, how do we historians make our voices heard? Now, the fourth reason for this presentation is a recent development in Senegal. I was in Senegal for 3 weeks, from November to December, and I was in King Fahd Hotel, where several things happened as to the decolonization of that country. Faye, who is leading the country now, doesn't want to hear anything about France. And they're coming up with all kinds of rhetoric that would demonize France and make that country to follow a new path of development. And there was this massacre in December 1, 1944, when some Senegalese that fought in the Second World War were returned to Senegal. They were not given the allowances, they asked questions, and over 300 of them were executed. So the Senegalese now are asking France to answer questions around what is called Traoré massacre. Now, the last one is this Trump's America First. You know, immediately Trump was brought to office, he rolled out several executive orders. And the question I asked myself, did this man talk to strategic historians? You know, if he didn't talk to strategic historians, then he might actually be digging the grave of that country, because several things will fail, several things will collapse. But if he was advised by strategic historians, then probably there is a strategy behind many of the things that he's saying. But if all that he's saying is just based on emotionality, is just emotional, emotions don't build a nation. You need a strategy. And strategic historians will tell you what worked in the past, what failed in the past. Now, for me, I think strategic history is part of what is called applied history. And applied history is not too popular in Africa, but there is a journal that was established to promote this field of specialization, you know, and I will read from that journal's call for paper. You know, I'm reading from the call for paper now. It says, The Journal of Applied History offers a platform for historians to bring the results of their historical research to bear on the present, on the issues that concerns us today. It seeks to promote historical thinking as an essential element of discussions about the challenges that our society are now confronted with. And he said, historical thinking involves first and foremost a keen eye for context in the broadest sense, and awareness of the social, economic, cultural, political, demographic, and environmental conditions within which the historical process unfolds, which prompts us to move beyond easy, rhetorically appealing, but often lazy analogies between past and present that obscure the complexity and idiosyncrasy of discrete events. So this journal is inviting scholars to, historians, to make themselves relevant. But that journal also call attention to the fact that you cannot write applied history just focusing on your narrow training as a historian. There's the need for you to go multidisciplinary because you cannot explain things around you today just based on storytelling. There's the need for analysis. You need to be deep in philosophy. You need to be deep in social science methodologies. You need to be deep in context analysis. So this journal is actually advising scholars, I think it's an indirect way of telling you that if you just send stories to that journal, the journal will not be accepted. Now, why are we here? I said this is an age of reglobalization. Different nations of the world are globalizing. They are making new friends. There was a time when we would say Nigeria is part of the United Kingdom. That era is gone. Nigeria now is interacting with the Qataris. We are interacting with the Emirati. We are interacting with the Turks. We are interacting with Russians. We are interacting with the Chinese. So now our strategies determine which countries we relate with. So it's no longer a matter of Britain. Britain too is struggling to establish new relationships. And that is what led to Brexit. Now, French-speaking countries are saying enough of France. So in other words, the world is changing. And as the world is changing, your strategies must also change. So in the presentation, I tried once again to show how those writing history, that is, historians, how they need to shape their understanding of the past and how to use the past. Now, I call attention to the book published by Professor Gray. The title is War, Peace, and International Relations, an Introduction to Strategic History. So this man tried to show that strategic history is needed for everybody, whether you're a politician, whether you're a political scientist, you're a philosopher, you are whatever, you must understand strategic history for actually being able to provide useful information that will guide the world. And from the late 1990s, Palgrave Macmillan has been publishing a series they call Studies in Military and Strategic History. But when you look at I looked at all the books they have published, no, not one African is there. And most of the scholars who have published in this series wrote on Africa. The strategies, the French strategies in Africa, the British strategies in Africa, it's like people now are sharing with the rest of the world the strategies that they used. Now, coming to the issue of remembering, forgetting, and denying in strategic history, Professor Adebayo has introduced us to it, that human memory sometimes fails, and therefore what we remember is always a function of what is left in our brain. And what we forget also could be a function of what we choose to remember or what we are forced to remember. The last time we met, Professor Ogunyemi actually talked to us about how people even lose their mental faculty to the extent that they are not able to function well in the society. But I'm pushing up this discussion by saying remembering that we are discussing here include selective memory and memorization influence, strategic narratives. You remember only what is good for you. You remember only what is good. And therefore, if I come to you to say, I want to marry your daughter, and I need information about the family, you are most likely not to remember the 12 goats you stole in the year 2012. You will remember only the only good things that you did. And when you look at many of the history books we have written, we present these books as the gospel truth. But those who provided us the information gave us only the information what we should know or what is convenient for them to give out. When I was studying the Hausa settlements in Ibadan, I came across several documents at the National Archives. And the Hausa people insisted, this is our own history. Then you also have forgetting. And you have what is called intentional or unintentional omission of historical facts. It distorts our understanding of past events and their strategic implications. So what I'm saying here is that beyond the failure of the memory, there are times we just pretend to forget certain things. And now when we are reminded of those things, we are most likely to deny it. And we have 5 types of denial. And I don't want to take us too deep into knowledge on denial. I mean, if it is obvious that it happened and it's known to everybody, you will say, okay, yes, it happened, but we were not responsible. Or you say, what happened, you are describing as red, but what we saw was black. So I'm not going deep into this. But the problem, the issue we are making here is that in selecting your data and framing your narrative, you remember what will help your intended conclusion, forget what may not be helpful, and deny whatever is deniable. Now I go to the case studies. The first one is military decolonization in the Sahel. And what I'm trying to say here is how Senegal, Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and surprisingly Ivory Coast, have decided to ask the French military to leave. And in the process of weaving together their narratives, you will see selective remembering, you see forgetting, and you see strategic denial of. So the French is asked to leave. And a colleague asked me, why are these French people leaving? They are leaving because there are some international conventions that say that once your host is asking you to leave, you must leave. If you refuse to leave, then you become an army of occupation. The second example, I try to give here is President Tinubu's overnight relationship with Macron. And I was in Senegal when he was visiting Macron, and the Senegalese told me that the reception he was given had never been given to any Francophone leader before. And in my own presentation here, I said it is a question, is what Yoruba people call Ayagban Ogungbegban. Aya, I don't know which animal is called Aya, but what this is trying to say is that the hunter who is trying to kill an animal in the bush is a wise man. But the animal that the hunter is trying to kill is not necessarily a foolish being. So the two of them are wise. So Macron is very wise. He's playing monkey game. And I think Tinubu too is playing a monkey game. But until Tinubu tells us what he is doing, it's difficult for anybody to think that he's acting reasonably, because all French countries are running away from French-speaking countries are running away from France. And then it is then we are moving towards France. And then when we look at the history of this country, France worked against us during the Civil War. France worked against us when managing Boko Haram crisis. France is the reason why we don't have ECHO as the money for ECOWAS this thing. So France has never been our best friend. But why is Tinubu now becoming a friend to France? To me, I think it's a question of strategy. Strategic historians must have talked to Macron to say if you're able to capture this man, then you might be able to solve your problem. And I believe that probably Tinubu too was advised to use that strategy. But when you look around us critically, you will see that, this is the era of diplomacy, is the era of strategy. The question is, who among us is teaching strategy? Most especially, I'm addressing historians now. To what extent are we teaching strategy? If we do not teach our students strategy, then there will be a problem. Now I'm closing this presentation by saying what is the way forward for African historiography in what we are trying to say. I'm saying here that we need to decolonize historical narratives. There are many things we're told, but we accepted them hook and sinker. If those that design the strategies, around what we have written down, if those people have not given us the strategies that informed what we wrote down, then it is most likely that many of the things we have written are misleading. And then we need to interrogate our sources very well and our methodologies very well. We need to promote African voices and perspectives. We don't need to, we should stop accepting these ideas of America said, because sometimes when you are listening to presidents of Nigeria, at even international meetings, they will say, according to America, our population is this. According to the United Nations, the question is, what is your own population? Now, these people who are giving you these population figures, they are acting strategically, either to make you look too overpopulated or to make you look, they have reasons for saying what they are saying. The question is, what is our own position? There's a need for us to build a community of practice that will promote the knowledge of strategic history. We need to establish networks and collaboration, develop and participate in academic programs that can expand frontiers of knowledge on strategic history. We need to mentor our young ones and support emerging scholars in this area, because our knowledge of the little we knew about the past may not be able to survive us under this highly challenging global environment in which we find ourselves. Then we need to engage audiences and communities. We need to integrate African historiography into global historical narratives. We need to address contemporary challenges and relevance in the context of strategic history. Then we need to foster a culture of critical historical thinking. It's not just a matter of, I saw it in the archives and then I'm using it, without actually, questioning the reasons behind the information given to us. Let me stop at this level. I chair this subcommittee, and I should not be exceeding the time that ought to have been allocated for this presentation. So let me not misuse my position as the chairman of the subcommittee. Once again, I want to thank Professor Akamu Adebayo, my boss. And let me use this opportunity to also thank our elders, most especially our foundation president, Professor Ayo Bangboshe, who is celebrating his 93rd birthday. We wish you long life, sir. And let me also use this to congratulate Professor Olu Obafemi and Professor Isaac. I call him Isaac Oloyede because he too calls me Ishak Albert. So I want to congratulate the two of them for becoming emeritus professors. of the University of Ilorin. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Let me join you in thanking the FP and all the others that you have mentioned. Let me repeat what I said before we move to the dialogue. If you are not speaking, when you are not speaking, please mute yourself. And there's this sound coming throughout the time that Professor Albert was speaking. I can't place it. It's like somebody is receiving hundreds of messages. I don't know how they go through the day with that many messages, but hey, if it works for you, that's okay. But thank you again, Professor Albert. I have a few questions myself, but I'm not going to abuse my position as chair and start asking those questions. I would like to open it up for others. I see several hands already raised, and others who are interested in speaking, please have your hands raised electronically. I'll be calling you as I see the hands raised. So please bear with me if you raise your hand first and then I call you last. I'm sorry. So let me start with Professor Ayo Lukoju. I think he was indirectly mentioned in the lecture, so it's just appropriate that you have chosen to speak. So, Professor Lukoju.
Thank you very much, our chair, Professor Kamadebayo, our own AG. I want to thank Professor Isaac Olawale Albert.
Can you switch on your video, please?
Am I on?
If you can, please, let's see your face.
Oh, to switch on my video.
Yes, sir.
I'm in my bedroom. Let's see whether it will work. The place is dark though.
Selective picture.
Yes. So, I just want to say that Professor Albert covered a lot of space, and it's very difficult to respond to all the issues he raised. I just want to say that yes, we want to thank him for his I would say spectacular scholarship, his encyclopedic knowledge and all that. And then he's been doing for many years what we have been doing here at the University of Lagos. So thank you for marketing the University of Lagos, the Department of History and Strategic Studies. Since the days of Professor Ashiwaju, Professor Emeritus, Professor Shintokun, we have been doing applied history, utilitarian history. People have vilified us for that. They said we have sold out and all that. But I'm happy that here is an advocate from you. Yeah. Of all places saying we have for 30, 40 years. So thank you very much for that. And the reference you made to me, I want to appreciate that. Let me call your attention to the fact that in 2002, the littoral states in Nigeria sued the federal government. They took the federal government to court and won the case at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court judgment mentioned me by name as an expert witness because I sought an affidavit in support of that of their cause, and they won. But it's unfortunate that they never paid me anything for the service I rendered because I thought I was doing it in the national interest. So we historians have tried to engage with those people, but they have not reciprocated. In summer of last year, I was a Steers Fellow at Stellenbosch University, and I gave a seminar entitled, "What has a historian got to do with seaports?" And that question was, please, I'll be through in a few minutes. That question was asked by a port official in 1993. They couldn't understand what a historian was doing with seaports. And as Professor Albert has mentioned, if you have read my work, a few of them, we are going to see that in the true tradition of University of Lagos, we not only write, we make policy prescriptions, but the truth is, Nigerian officials don't read, they don't engage, they don't go beyond their narrow circle of advisors, who are, of course, not well informed. By the grace of God, for example, I've worked on Japanese ports, West African ports, and I have ideas to share with them, but they will not read, they will not engage. And it's very, very unfortunate indeed. And my final point is about selective amnesia. Professor Akinade used to be the pioneer VC of Osun State University. Professor Shinyoyeweso invited me to the place in 2018. I gave a lecture, and I hope that if you give me the permission, I will circulate that lecture. The title of the lecture was very simple. It says, "We've been here before. The challenge of selective amnesia." So I think that this lecture by Professor Agba should be circulated far and wide. Everybody should read it, and we should apply it to our daily lives. The final point about interdisciplinarity is very well taken. Historians must go beyond the narrow confines of their basic research. We should do applied research, and we should also do synthesis. Thank you, Professor Albert, and thank you, NAL Lectures Committee, for this wonderful menu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me repeat what has been mentioned just now. Keep your comments to no more than 2 minutes. If you can make it shorter, that would be great also, because as I see on the screen right now, we have 4 people waiting to speak. I'll go through those 4, and then Professor Albert will respond. And then by then, there will be others who will be willing to speak. Professor Ola Ogunyemi.
Thank you so much, Chair. Professor Albert, that was a wonderful speech. Although I'm not a historian, but I really enjoyed it and took a lot from it as well. So thanks for your scholarship. Now I have a comment and a question. You see, I think there's an assumption that what we do will necessarily, interest an outsider. So most of us are sitting in the ivory tower and thinking, oh, they should come to us. I think that presumption should change, okay? And history is very, very important, as you mentioned. But as a media person myself, I think, and this is a sort of an encouragement to now, we need to engage with the media, okay? Now, in the UK here, historians, they are doing fantastic job of impactful research that they take to the media. One example I'll give is, who do you think you are? It's a very popular program on BBC. People want to know where they've come from, and they trace it back to 3rd generation, 4th generation, and it brings it home, history home to ordinary people, because at the moment, we are just doing something that, okay, well, blue sky research that ordinary people do not relate to. So bring it home to ordinary people. So partner with the media and have sections like that to talk about different things. I would like to know about the history of the seaport that you just mentioned there, Dr. Professor Oluko, you mentioned that now. Of Lagos Seaport, what's the history of it? That kind of something. But that should be in the media. So that's my comment. The question is this, what is the relationship between history, memory, and well-being? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I call the next person, I want to go to the chat and read a few things. I like this one, and I just had to read it. We should report the person disturbing us to the police for cyber nuisance. Really, this person with the phone is acting like a cyber nuisance already. So anyway, I want to read what the FP has written. Thank you, Professor Isaac Albert, for this very stimulating presentation. I'm wondering whether there is something that can be called selective amnesia. So he will be answering that later. Thank you and congratulations, Professor Albert. That's from Lydia Umar. and very insightful presentation. That's from Saida Musa. And I suggest young lecturers joining academic exercise like this to be given certificate for participating. We will let Professor Isaac Albert handle that. It is a series. So next person I will call is Professor Hakim Tijani.
Thank you very much, sir. And good morning from my neck of the wood in Baltimore. Apologies for joining late. I actually was one of the first three that joined. And I realized that Georgia, Maryland, we have an hour, and of course, Nigeria, 6 hours. And I have to teach. So, but I came in timely, in my opinion, listening to the summation of Professor Isaac Albert. And one thing I would like to say is this. It is about pedagogy. Pedagogy, pedagogy. It is about preparation, preparation, preparation. How do we teach the content? Are we still in the old style of dictating the notes? Or are we engaging both at the undergraduate and the postgraduate or graduate class? Inclusivity, whereby you challenge the critical minds of the students. Are we ready to learn from them? Or we remain in the old garb of, I am the professor and I know it all? I beg to disagree, we don't know it all. No matter the years we've been teaching, we will have to learn from our students, because some of them come to class with some information that we probably do not have. And then with such information, we can engage in critical knowledge sharing. Let me round up because of time. How do we employ those early career people? Do we just advertise, select, and then we end up with the usual, can we meet you at the interview? I'll give an example at Adeleke University that we were privileged to pioneer. We brought in some of the stuff that we learned from people like Professor Akinjide Oshintokun, both at LASU and at University of Lagos. And what is that? Critical thinking, allowing students to engage us. But when it comes to appointment, I can tell you that we succeeded in establishing a situation whereby we are not just meeting you. If you are selected, you will give a teaching demonstration. Students or makeup students will evaluate you. You go to the department, you interview. They will write their own report, and you come to the management and interview. And at the end of the day, I can tell you that those people that were interviewed in 2011 are still there today because they know what they went through. We did not just meet them. We also engage in continuous and sustainable pedagogical workshop. Lastly, and this has nothing to do with being to America, we utilize some important historical, because I'm a historian, institutions that we can use to relate, to go beyond theories and concepts. For instance, at Morgan, since 2006, I usually take my students to the Bureau of African Affairs.
Try to round up.
Thank you, sir. What I'm trying to say is that we must rethink the way we teach. We must refine and retool our pedagogy. We must also be inclusive. And I think that is what we are missing. most of the time. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing knowledge, Professor Alba.
Thank you, Professor Tijani. Professor Cornelius Kwede.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am about to end my PhD. Lectures. I'm taking a cue from the last session we had, and to ask two questions. Historiography at the level of individuals. Prof, while in his presentation, mentioned that people would want to remember the good things about their lives. Is it possible that that is actually the reason why, even at national level, in writing our history, we tend to document the best things we have achieved, forgetting the mistakes? And Professor Ola has maybe mentioned something. So should we say that the selective historiography at individual level helps in maintaining our mental health? Okay. Then the second question is with regards to the analogy Prof made with Tinubu's involvement with France. Now, in looking at history, yes, France has been more like a foe, trying to stand against some of our aspirations as a nation. Now that President Tinubu is taking strategic steps towards seeking opportunities to engage France, should history be speaking, or should we ignore the history and face what we have to achieve at the moment? Thank you very much.
Thank you. For me, the voice fades in and out. Professor Albert, did you get the question?
I got all the questions, sir.
Okay, good. I'll call the last person for this first round of comments, and then Professor Albert will respond. And that person is Professor Muritala Mansour.
Good evening, sir. Thank you, Chair Professor Adebayo. I want to appreciate Professor Albert sincerely. I'm a product of Ibadan School of History, and I'm still very proud to be one. In Ibadan School of History, we have history in all, vital area of specialties. But of course, because knowledge boundary is very wide, we are not presently into strategic studies. I have two questions. The first one, of course, has to do with expanding the platform for the training of younger minds in the area of strategic studies. And I want to put it to Professor Albert that at University of Ibadan, I know that strategic studies is domiciled in the Faculty of Multidisciplinary Studies. So my question is that, is there any way that you can collaborate with Faculty of Arts, especially Department of History, to benefit from the study of strategic studies? And if possible, can there be a program like a certificate in strategic history that would just be like a year program, which would enable the younger ones that are strategic inclined to benefit from it? That is the first question. And then the second one is that, yes, you have just touched on an important aspect of history, and that is applied history. Applied history, which of course is very vital for the development of any country or society, and which of course has not been explored greatly. And so teaching history beyond narratives is very important. And I want to ask a question, that will it be possible to have a center, a future development center, that will be purposely for strategic historians, where historians will come together to churn out policy-related work that will address our antecedents in this country, in order to further promote this new area of strategic history. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I see the hands up from Professors Babajide, Professor Ajayi Soyinka, Professor Adeoti, Professor okay, those are the three for now. Please hold on, don't go anywhere. We'll come back to you. So, Professor Albert, can you respond very briefly to each of these? If there is nothing further to say other than thank you, that would be great. So, so that we can get back to those who are waiting to speak.
Well, sir, I think the point I want to make, tying what Professor Lukoju and Masood said, tying them together, is to say that there is the need for us historians in Nigeria to reorganize. When I go to Abuja, it's like I live, it's like leaving every meeting fight, because I find it annoying when you find state officials saying we don't have competent hands in so area. I said, look, the competent hands are there. But the question is, when we are not actually ready to use those who are specialists in some of the problems that we are trying to, problems we are trying to solve. As Professor Lukoju said, in fact, across the African continent, when you read his work, it's does solid work on the issue of water transportation, maritime industry, and whatever. But when you listen to the policymakers there, when they talk, they say things that are too simple and that are not historically true. So, but the question is, how do we make our state officials to accept us? Professor Guyemi said we should not sit in our offices thinking they will accept us. We must develop strategies for selling ourselves to them. Well, I think we need to think through this. And luckily, Professor Lukoju is here. I think he's the most senior, he's one of the most senior scholars in that field today. Now, the issue of selective amnesia that Dr. Lydia Umar actually called attention to, I think was addressed by Professor Lukoju too, and he delivered a lecture on it. But what selective amnesia is actually trying to say is referring to intended and unintended, forgetting. You want to forget certain things about yourself, about your society. Many years ago, a northern Nigerian governor invited me to his state. I interacted with the security committee of the state. And obviously, they denied this Hausa-Fulani relationship. And at the national conference, I'm sure many of you saw how I was openly insulted at the national conference for combining Hausa and Fulani. But now, what Northerners tried to forget, the selective amnesia of the past is coming out now. And everybody is saying clearly, we Hausa people are not Fulani. And that the conflict we have in the Northwest, which is called banditry today, is between the Fulani and Hausa. It's coming out very clearly. Now, what the point we're trying to say is that when it's convenient for you, you can deny certain things. You can forget certain things. But when you run into trouble, you'll be forced to remember them. I think what the others have said are pieces of advice that I've taken in good faith. And to me, they all contribute, they all constitute, in my own estimation, significant contribution to knowledge. So that I don't waste too much time of Oga.
Thank you. That's good. And now let's go to Professor Babajide.
Thank you, Prof, for giving me the audience and the opportunity. I want to first appreciate you for this beautiful lecture. Now, my contribution, I don't know that history is an important subject. Every subject has its own history. I'm a science educator. We have history of science, history of mathematics, history of physics, and so on and so forth. As long as this subject is important, I'm of the opinion that as students should be taught right from the secondary school level. During my own period, I read there was history in the secondary school as a subject. But for some years now, history has been cancelled the secondary school level. So what are you doing to resuscitate the status of this important subject right from the secondary school level? Because if students offer history from the secondary school level, they will now rise up to offer it at the tertiary institution. And so the subject will have a wider recognition and importance. Thank you. I'm in University of Lagos, Department of Science Education. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Babajide. Let me go to Professor Ajayi Soyinka.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Albert, for this lecture. It's a big eye-opener for me. And it also opened lots of ideas. I have a question and a comment. You have said that what I would call mass deflection of Francophone countries from France, of Francophone countries from France. And it's long overdue, but you said it's sentimental, and I also tend to agree. But do you think that there is what we can call strategic timing for those Sahelian Francophone countries to divest from France? And is there something else beside the sentimental feeling that, France has exploited us for so long? Let me put my own bias out in front. Do you think that Russia is also doing its own strategic planning in that area? The comment I have is the idea that, I think it was Professor Olukoji who said it, that we should get our politicians, our leaders, to look into our works and draw copiously from. This is what is done in other progressive countries, and we should not be left behind. But like he said, our politicians don't read. And it's going to be quite a while before this happens. I'm sure it will happen, but I don't know when it will happen. So I was thinking, is there something we can do in the interim? And I'm borrowing these ideas from public television service that we have here in the US, radio, television services. Now, these are services that the government used to subsidize, but now with all the politics going around, they now depend on membership-driven programs so that but I think as an academic body, we should consider, let's say, buying 1 hour from a television program station that we agree upon and promote our research, particularly strategically timed researches. When I say strategically timed researches, what is going on in the country? What do we need to face right there? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Adeoti.
Thank you very much, Professor Adebayo. I want to start by joining others in commending Professor Albert for that incisive lecture, and also thank Professor Akriade, the president, under whose leadership the lecture series has been taken to a new level. The intervention I want to make is in the area of understanding the new realities in the Francophone, West African countries. I try to understand, and the question is, of what benefit is this what you call military decolonization will be to the sub-region and of course the continent at the end of the day? Is it not going to be a case of collecting money from the hand of a hawk, and then you give it back to the eagle? That is, from one colonial master, to another, and then the implication of itemization of the continent, because you now have a new sub-region membership as different from ECOWAS. That's one. The other one is about strategic history and then diplomacy. Diplomacy is a field that is ruled by paradox and contradiction. In fact, I see it as a field where the lines are never straight, and the actors there don't ever walk on a straight line. So if you have to deal with that kind of reality, and as strategic historian, of course, assuming that the leader for a problem had consulted, a group to give some strategic history, you are likely to find a situation where what the leadership will get will be from the perspective that those strategic historians have access to. So when the leader now wants to take a decision, I'm looking at the example of the current situation, the president now. Will it not be a case of alatishe ni matishe at the end of the day? So that stoba kojusi ekota, you can complete the proverb. That's the issue, that sometimes strategic history can also pose some problems for the leadership, so that at the end of the day, they may have to take their own decision regardless of those facts that they have access to. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Adeoti. I will call on Professor Femi Otubanjo. I think you have to unmute yourself.
I want to, okay, good. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Good.
Oh.
Good evening, gentlemen.
I think we are having technical difficulty.
Ladies and gentlemen, very much, Professor. I really any history that is not strategic. When we review the doc, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
It's choppy, but you can go on.
Yeah. Okay. Let me remove it. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Okay. Now, my first question is really, yeah, I can hear you now. My first major point is that, is there any history that is not strategic? Before we start talking about strategic historiography, when we review a doctoral dissertation for our students, do we not point out to them a strategic aim or purpose which they themselves must have crafted? More importantly, I was in my first year of studying history as an undergraduate. One of the first names that came to mind, which I've not forgotten, is that of Trevor Roper, Professor Trevor Roper of Cambridge. You said that Africa had no history. The history of Africa is the history of Europeans in Africa. That really has been the catalyst of the African School of History, which had its initial foundation in Ibadan. So when we talk about history, it is about creating an image, a narrative about a strategic purpose. There's nobody who will write history that is not strategic and so on. Then, because I'm not even sure that in this world today, anybody can get funding for a history that is not aimed at a strategic narrative. Nobody is going to give you money to write anti-American, to write about racism in America, to write about Donald Trump and negativity in politics. They're going to give you money that will ultimately give a narrative that is positive for the country. The second point I want to make is about penetrating the bureaucracy. That's a very difficult thing for everybody, particularly in an environment of illiteracy like our own. But you must know that the first instinct of these bureaucrats is that they're looking at direct functionality. When you bring an idea and you are saying you're a professor of history, this instantly becomes cynical. The situation requires that we be interdisciplinary. But what we do in our different universities is to compete unnecessarily, to elbow each other. Political science will not work with history. History will not work. They will not work with economics. Geography will not work with biology. And so, if we want to be effective in government, we must use platforms such as this to bring proposals, policy positions that will go to government, not as individuals, not as individual disciplines. And it's difficult on its own because our people, they just want to take something from the drawer. There's enough ideas in the world to borrow from. So it is not easy for you to bring your own ideas and penetrate, because what they are looking at is not what you are looking at. You are looking for efficiency. They are looking for profit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we are able to get through the technical difficulty. I will call on one last person before I call on Professor Albert to respond. And that's getting us closer to the end of the program. So, Professor Olufunke Adeboye.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also want to appreciate Professor Albert for that wonderful presentation. I have just one comment, and the comment is that beyond the content of our research, whether historical research or religious or whatever fields we come from, can we also talk about a strategic dissemination of our research outputs, so that we have to be deliberate, have a strategy for how to disseminate our research output. I have seen some units in UNILAG practice there, and it has been so successful. They started with documentaries, and they put up a very big documentary that when they wanted to do the screening, it was a big event where they invited all the who is who from the world outside the academy, and they all came. And when they watched the documentary and the issues that it raised about Lagos, it created ripple effects. So that even though that documentary was done some 2 years ago, the debate it generated, the shufflings that have been done, they are still going on up till today. And the conversation between the town and gown is still ongoing. So I think for us, we should also talk about strategic dissemination of our research output. So that it's not just the usual textbooks or the journal articles or our conference proceedings. We must be very creative so that our work will reach a larger audience. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. There are several hands up now, and I have to appreciate the interest that has been. First, let me go to the text, go to the chat, and make sure that I do not miss several of the. Most of it is thank you, Professor Albert, but then there is a number of them that had questions embedded in it. And I think when you have time, Professor Albert, you might want to go through. I think this is being recorded, so you can go through and then incorporate those questions into your revision of the paper. There's somebody who wanted to know something about language. It's Professor Lydia Umar. How do we deal with the challenge of language as individual historians in view of your suggestion for globalization or re-globalization? So that's a lot of comments there. So please take a look later. I'll have to, I thought I saw another hand, but what is remaining right now is Professor Da Silva. So please go ahead, Professor Da Silva.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to join others to commend the efforts of the lecturer this evening, Professor Isaac Albert. And of course, the team that organized this presentation. I want to take a cue from the last speaker, particularly with regards to this issue of strategic dissemination of research outputs. In the days of General Yakubu Gowon, the Nigerian Chambers of Commerce and Industry used to put up a position paper every year during budget preparation by the federal government. And this position paper had always been an input, very invaluable input in shaping the budget for the year. And it was during the time of Chief Henry Fajemirokun. I'm doing a work on him right currently. Chief Henry Fajemirokun, who happened to be a former chairman of the Nigerian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. The headquarters was in Lagos then. And I'm just wondering, instead of us feeling bad that government is not patronizing us and all of that, can Nigerian Academy of Letters not have a cell of people who can put we talk of strategic history, who can put pen to paper and present a position paper that can help the federal government to drive certain policies. It could even inform even the federal government policies to advance the cause of this country. And so that underscores what the last speaker has mentioned, the need for us to go out all there, package our, our position paper that we believe can help government, and present it to the federal government, particularly the president. And the president will know which ministry, are relevant to study this kind of position paper to help drive his policies and other things. That way, I think we'll be acting strategically, and our, the input of NAL will be acknowledged and will be appreciated, and will also be useful to drive and advance the cause of the federal government concerning, development of this country. That's just my little contribution. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Professor Da Silva. And Professor Olukwono had raised his hand, but he had also put his question in the chat. I'll read the question, and if you want to add more to it, Professor Olukwono, you can go ahead. How do we digitize our history in terms of data generated or in terms of analysis and documentation? So those are the questions and comments. Professor Albert?
Thank everybody for your words of encouragement and your questions. I think the first question I want to respond to, which I picked from the chat, is from Professor Guyemi. He wanted to know the relationship between history, memory, and well-being. It is not a question that one can fully answer here. But I remember that before Muhammad Ali died, he was at advanced stage of what I would call dementia. There are other names for what he was going through. So they brought some boxers to him, and he could not even recognize them until a form of history was created. How he won the fight against this person, and then he started recognizing the people, standing in front of him as a boxer. And at a stage, he also tried to do shadow boxing. So there is a relationship between history, memory, and well-being. But in the context of this presentation, you want to hear only good history. In my career in the University of Ibadan, I went through hell. There are certain things I just don't want to remember. But there are certain people I also want to remember. Now, if you come to my office and start reminding me of certain histories, I may not be happy with you. So you can help to improve my mental health by actually telling me the things, probably the story of how I became what I am today. So there are situations where you don't want to remember certain things. There are times you want to remember certain things. There are times you want to forget certain things. And there are moments you want to clearly come out to deny certain things, most especially if you have ever been demonized. So you want to explain to people, this is what happened. So I think the question you have asked, Professor Oguyemi, is an excellent paper that all of us, the two of us, can co-author. And I will get in touch with you later on it. Professor Babajide called attention to the strategic timing of what we're witnessing in the Sahel. Yes, it is timely. we produced an edition of the Journal of African Terrorism on coup in Africa. And in my own contribution, I call attention to the concept of civilian coup. Those who make it impossible for people to have free and fair elections, of course, are paving way for, to me, I think, specialists in civilian coup making. And civilian coup makers actually make military coup possible. Now, when this problem in the Sahel started with Guinea, the other states started acting strategically. So yes, I agree with you that the timing is good, and even the countries that are yet to engage in military coup making, of course, are watching these other countries to say, look, we'll take advantage of what is happening with them. But there is a question you asked about getting rid of France and bringing in Russia. In fact, I asked them questions because I had reasons to represent several international organizations in some of these countries. And the explanation they gave me is to say, yes, we are replacing France with so. But they told me that whereas in the past, we got 1 naira from France, our new friends are giving us 10 naira. So it's a form of rational economic decision to say, look, to improve our country, it's difficult for us to continue to do business with these people. And of course, we remember Professor Gbagbo. You know, Gbagbo was an academic. One of the things he rejected when he became president of Cote d'Ivoire was to say we are no longer paying tax for the State House because the State House in Abidjan belongs to France. So, you know, Ivorians pay tax to France for using some. So these people are saying we can no longer accept this. And then their foreign exchange, their foreign reserves, you have to pay percentage to. So it's like monkey they walk, baboon they chop. So this is what these people are strategically replacing, you know, rejecting. And as they are rejecting it, they told us that they are making headways now with the little, you know, mineral resources that they have. And I think this is the issue that Professor Adeotitu was actually trying to raise, to say, look, you cannot send away France and then you bring in the Chinese, you bring in, but what these people told us at strategic meetings we held with them is to say, look, our situation is better. Those of us from Anglophone countries might not understand what they are saying, but these people were under slavery and they are, trying to free themselves. Now, when we consider this issue of, Professor Otubanjo said there is no history that is strategic. Yes, I agree with him, sir, that every history is strategic. But strategic history is the history behind the events. Most of our books talk about events. The British came so period. Why did they come? No, they didn't. Nobody was told why they came. When they were designing your education, nobody told you why they designed the education that way. They told you that part of what they came to do is to civilize us, the civilizing mission thesis. And they took away our artworks, they destroyed our shrines, and they took all these artworks to London. So you pay now to even be able to see the insignias of the idol worshiping. They took them to America. We pay now. So these people they came with strategies. And these strategies, they might not show us all the strategies. The only thing is we wrote about their coming. When they left Ilesha, they went to Osogbo. That is all we wrote. But we did not, nobody told us why they came and the strategies they used. Of course, for us in strategic history, we know that what they did to conquer any African country, all you needed to do was to conquer their chiefs. And this is because we deify these gods. So these chiefs. So once you capture the Alafin, you capture this thing, then they know that the other people will be submissive. So strategic history is not just looking at the story. It's looking at the hidden agenda behind the story. When you are playing drafts, when you are playing your game, you don't share your strategies. Of course, they will say you were defeated 7 times, but nobody will tell you about the strategy. Strategies are usually hidden, but strategic history now is saying that strategic historians want to go back and take a look at why this thing was made possible. And that is how and why the strategic history is different from the general history that we're talking about. Yes, can we talk about our research can also talk about strategic dissemination? I agreed absolutely with Professor Funke Adeboye. And that is what we're playing with now at the level of the Council for the Study of Social Science Research in Africa, CODESTRIA. We are just back from some of the meeting, from the strategic meeting. What we're trying to do now is to say, how do we get our leaders to appreciate existing knowledge and studies? But my debate here on this is to say that what we're discussing here creates the impression that these people don't know that the knowledge exists. They know that the knowledge exists. But the problem is that they are not interested in using the knowledge. And for me, theoretically, I would differentiate here between personal interests of these leaders and national interest. There is what is called national interest. National interest, is expected to drive the action of political leaders. But in Africa, what drives the strategies of our leaders, or what drives the action of our leaders most of the time, is the personal interest of the political leader. And I'm still trying to critically study this issue of our relationship with France now. Is it driven by the personal interest of our president or driven by our national interest? You are dealing with two things. For now, my own conclusion is that African leaders are not driven by national interest. They are driven by personal interest. And I think this is where the problem lies. Now, a leader that is driven by personal interest is most likely to be anti-intellectual. He might not even be interested in your digging out, putting out the knowledge out there. They see you as an enemy. And to me, that is my thesis on the relationship between ASU and federal government. Because I think any country that is interested in moving forward will know that this is a knowledge economy. The ideas you draw from the universities will drive the development of your country. But a situation where the state is operating there, the society is operating there, and the intellectual community is on its own, to me, does not portend a good picture about where we are really going. The last question, how do we digitize our history? I think we're going here in the direction of what is called digital history, digital historiography, and well, it's a project for all of us. But I want to challenge Professor Lukoju that historians need to get more serious with how we do our work, because one, we need to stop these ideas of thinking that history is not important and that very soon they'll be gathering us to learn how to make soap and make candles, So we have to come out. I don't know what strategies we're going to use, but to show that Nigeria cannot move forward without a good treatment of strategic history. I rest my case here, sir.
Thank you, Professor Albert, and thank you everyone that's here. The numbers, Zoom keeps giving you the number of people still on the call.
73.
At some point, I saw 91, and that's a really good day. And I want to thank all those who showed up. And I also want to thank all those who created time to ask questions, to make comments. Memory is important. Most of us that remain on this call, so right now, most of us are getting to that point when our memories begin to fade. And it's important to recall certain things. And that's what also happens in the life of a nation. And I think that is the issue that Professor Albert has left us with today, that in the life of a nation, sometimes they decide what to emphasize. And I want to go back to what he said about Macron. He didn't share his screen to give us the PowerPoint, but there's a slide in that PowerPoint where President Macron was griping, was fuming that the Sahelian nations were ungrateful. But that's a manner of selective memory. Someone with strategic thinking had to also let him know that there was a point France also was not grateful to these Sahelian countries. After the Second World War, when France did not want to leave, France did not even say thank you for helping us in the Second World War. Thank you for dying for France. But now he's developing a love relationship with Nigeria, which again demonstrates that the Nigerian political elite needs to be careful. And I want to also end with what the former president, Duro wrote on the chat. I can't find it right now, but I think he said that he grew up in the North. And during the time that he grew up in the North, there was Hausa, there was Fulani, each separate. And then there was Hausa Fulani. And now we seem to be coming to an age when there is Hausa and there is Fulani separate. And he asked, what's going on? Exactly. What is going on, Professor Albert? And what is going on to memory and historiography? I think this is something that we will continue to talk about in the field for a long time. And we just want to thank you at this point for your presentation. I don't know if you want to say something about the next one now that we still have 73 people on the call. You might want to announce what is coming up. Maybe the president of NAL wants to do that. So let me yield the floor to the president of NAL.
Thank you, Professor Adebayo, for moderating such an excellent and rewarding session. I'd like to thank Professor Albert for leading this conversation. We know that in the last 30 years plus, the teaching and researching of history has evolved seriously. And the acceptance of the new methodologies has taken different trajectories in different institutions. When Professor Lukojo was referring to the response to what was happening in the Department of History and Strategic Studies, University of Lagos, he was taking a shot at me, maybe not directly, but we've had these conversations about what is history and where is history going. I mean, when I was doing history of international relations in IFE, I was actually told to leave the department, that I was not a historian, that I should go to the Department of International Relations or Political Science. But it is good that now we're beginning to see a greater acceptance of what we are doing and what others are doing that is not regarded as core history. And that there's history for every discipline. There's a history, there's a philosophy, there's a sociology. You can't have any meaningful discussion of architecture, for instance, without the history, without the sociology, without the philosophy of it. So what Professor Albert is doing today is leading us in the direction where we should have been going long ago. And I'd like to say that Professor Beraji Professor Da Silva was talking about the need for now to come up with a team that will advise the government. I want to say this, government is not short of technical advisory, knowledge advisory. Sometime next week, the president will be receiving this year's cohort of the National Institute. Professor John Ibachi is online. Is a graduate of the National Institute, MNI. MNI presents policy positions to our government every year. And every year it gathers dust. And this year's own is on empowerment, youth creation, economy, and all that. I was discussing with a member of that group yesterday. They're making a presentation with Mr. President next week. But we're also sure that nothing will come out as policy response. As Provost of the Anti-Corruption Academy of Nigeria, we're having policy dialogues 2 or 3 times a year. The positions are remitted to the government and are never carried out. But that shouldn't discourage us from doing what we ought to do as scholars, as knowledge generators, hoping that one day things will change. Currently, there is the issue of the deregulation of the Nigerian police. For some of us following the conversations that Kem Rotimi is leading in the media, he is taking us back to history. What has happened before? How did we handle the issue of native authority police, local government police in the past? And what are the implications for deregulating the police force now? Nobody is talking. And when the current exercise fails, nobody will remember that a historian has tried to draw our attention to what has been done before. Sorry, I'm not supposed to give any comments at this time, but what I'm saying is that it has happened before. Like Ayo Olukoju's lecture at Osun when I was VC. We have been there before, and others will also be here. But what lessons do we learn? Are we going to be driven by donor-driven research, or are we going to do history for history purpose? Let me thank everybody who has been present. Let me thank the FP who has been a leading light as usual, and for many of our senior people who are online. Professor Abba will tell us the next one, but I'd like to tell us that the recording of this session is available. If you want a copy, you can put your email in the chat room. I will not close the chat room immediately to allow people to put their email addresses there. But you can also put it and send it to NAL, admin@nalonline.org.ng. If you need a copy, please send your email address to admin@nalonline.org.ng. I will make the recording available to you. Once Professor Albert sends us the paper, we'll also share it with you at our earliest convenience. Let me appreciate everybody. We're looking forward to the next edition. Professor Albert, when is the next edition? Who's speaking? Who will be sharing?
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that I don't have the calendar here, but we will.
Oh, if you give me a second, I will tell you.
Online. Okay, please permit us for not having the calendar here, but we'll get it across to all of us.
The next seminar is that of Professor. Just a second, please. Yeah. The next one is Professor Ogunyemi, Tunji Ogunyemi. Ogunyemi is of the Department of History of Obafemi Awolowo University. and he will be speaking on judgment debts and Nigeria's fiscal stability, the new Achilles heels. So it's on the 20th of February, 2025. And Professor Ogunyemi is online. Tunji Ogunyemi is online. I've seen him today. We're looking forward to his presentation. If there's any other, no other announcement.
Question.
Professor Adebayo, you should share that as well, because that's the area.
Professor Ogunyemi asked a question earlier, so he was there.
No, that's Professor Ola Ogunyemi.
No, we not the Ogunyemi here is from the United Kingdom, but the Ogunyemi we are referring to here is from Obafemi Awolowo University, sir.
Yeah.
I made a mistake already. I called somebody.
Actually, the two of them were online. Professor Ola Ogunyemi is still online.
Yes.
I don't know whether Tunji is still online.
I called Jacob Kehinde. I thought the next name would be Olukman, but it's not. It's
that was
Ayatayo, so I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Ayatayo from the University of Ibadan.
Yeah, that's another JK. Yeah. Damilola Adebayo, I can see you online. I know you're not
he's there.
Let me appreciate all of us. I think we're going to close this session. We have gone almost 30 minutes beyond our time, but I believe that we all know that we've had a very rewarding time. Thank you very much and good night. Professor Folabo, Esho.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sas.
Yeah, thank you. TJ.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Our leaders, we thank you, all of you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for your leadership and
Good evening, Auntie.
for this lecture series.
Well done, Prof.
Thank you.
Professor Albert Ekushel.
Professor Ajayi Soyinka.
Iṣẹ́ tẹ́ gbé lé
Ẹ kú
ọlọ́wọ́
ọjọ́ mẹ́ta mà.
là
Màá pè yín tí wàá parí class. I have a class at 1 now. I'll call you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. You have
Mo
my
yẹ wo
number.
fọ́tò wa lánàá ni. Yes, ma.
Yeah, please send it.
Professor
Thank you.
Ododo,
I'll be
good
expecting
evening.
your call.
Yes, ma.
Yeah.
Please, you can still put your email address in the chat room if you want a copy of
Professor Adebayo, I will call you too, sir.
No problem.
Yes, sir. Professor Akinade, I owe you 10 calls. I'm sorry, sir.
No problem.
Ọ̀gá Adébáyọ̀ adúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ yín o, ẹ ṣé o.
President Ododo, see you in Abuja very soon.
Color to it, so thank you, sir.
All right, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. Bye. I have to start my class.
Professor Albert, thank you, sir.
Ẹ ṣé o, Prof.
Professor Albert.
All right. Another meeting.
No, I'm in class. Are you coming next week for the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies?
Next week, I need program Kaleko. But I will be in touch with you, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Kasoro.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
All
Yes, sir. All right. Yes, sir. Thanks for the...
Thank you so much. Sir.
Yes, sir.
We are waiting for your paper, sir.
Good evening, Professor Oni.
How are you?
I'm fine, sir.
Okay. Sir.
All right. Hello. Meeting consing.
Okay, ma. Odaro, ma.
Bravo. Diary.
Yes, ma.
Bravo.
Emakileo.
Oh, how was your reading?
Yeah, very successful.
It went very well. I listened to it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
Follow.
Etiro.
Good night, everybody.
Kaleza.
Hello, bye-bye.
How am I?
Prof.
Shele ya bile yodi.
Ilẹ̀ wa.
Okay.
O fẹ́ kí Trump gbé mi.
I have a 5-year visa to the US, but I'm not keen on going there.
Sorry. Sonny, how are you, Sonny?
Fine, sir. Good to hear you. Good to see you, sir. The great Ododo. Thank you, sir.
King
All right,
Ododo.
everyone. Take care. Bye. Yes.
King Ododo the Great.
I got to hear it. Oh, is that a
Good evening and good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you, sirs.
Good night, sir. Yes, sir.
Dennis.
Yes, sir.
Take
Good
us
evening,
to TikTok. Take us to TikTok. All right.
The boys are not
right.
So